What's up, everybody? Thralls of Metal here once again. I'm the Croc-Neck, and I am back with some States of Metal. So this one, possibly a little long overdue. I've been wanting to do this one for a while, because we are going to venture down south to the lower 48's naughty bits and go over some fucking Florida death metal. So, Florida, America's flaccid penis. Well, it kind of depends on what angle you look at, or what meme you actually look at here lately. But, what do I know about it? Well, I used to watch a lot of Miami Vice as a kid, and I thought that town was fascinating, and even more fascinating when I found out that that town is essentially built on a foundation of cocaine. I would say that makes it probably the most 80s city fucking ever. I know recently they're kind of big on book banning, which at least they're finally cracking down on that whole being able to read problem there. I know this state also has gators which eat people, and people which eat people, or at least their faces. But at least we know to combat crime, or possibly partake in it, we have the dynamic duo of Florida Man and Swamp Ape. I'm convinced they're pretty much the Batman and Robin of Florida. But of course, what we also have is quite possibly one of the biggest hubs for death metal ever. I would say this one state has to be one of the most important states in terms of death metal becoming a giant thing in metal in general. So many giant bands came out of here, and believe me, this was tough to actually do this list because, again, I only do 10, and I wanted to squeeze in some new stuff too. But this state was absolutely teeming with death metal, and possibly some of the most influential death metal bands of all time. I pretty much discovered death metal courtesy of Ace Ventura, saw the whole scene with Cannibal Corpse. I was absolutely entranced with how brutal and ugly that sound was. And pretty much from there, went and got some Cannibal Corpse, and I started hearing about all these cool fucking Florida bands, which, you know, ripping some atheists right now. But yeah, it was pretty much a giant fucking treasure trove of just awesome shit. So we're gonna go over what I feel are some really cool bands that accurately represent Florida's death metal scene. Of course, there's going to be some great nostalgic picks that everyone knows, but also kind of got some underground ones, or at least ones I feel are underrated, and even some newer ones in here. So let's get into this. And we are kicking this off with an absolute stone cold classic with Death's Leprosy. This, I would say, is possibly the most important album out of the entire Florida death metal scene, because while Scream Bloody Gore established them, and to a degree death metal in general, I know there's the whole debate between, you know, whether it was Possessed or Death that started death metal. Both of them definitely get credit, but when Death followed up their monstrous debut with this, which was even more refined and way more honed in on what would become the death metal sound. Literally everything you love about death metal in general is on this album, and was pretty much, you know, the one that influenced all the bands that came after him. While the thrash influence was still very much present, you had a much more dark, sinister sound. Chuck's vocals dropped down a little bit. The riffs were more sinister, more heavy, thicker production. This album is a flat-out beast with just stone cold classic after stone cold classic. Pull the Plug, up there with probably my top 5 death songs. I mean, honestly, this is my favorite death album. I've gushed about this album so damn much, but that didn't stop me. Of course I'm gonna fucking re-gush. I love this album. I love the fact that you can hear the improvements in musicianship, songwriting. I think it's a little bit more technical. Again, still raw, still ugly, still visceral, but everything feels a little bit tighter on this album. I pretty much love the entire album, but I mean, Born Dead, God, I love the title track. It's amazing. I already brought up Pull the Plug. Oh, dude, Primitive Waves. Choke on It is such an awesome, aggressive closer. I love how it opens and closes with 2 longer tracks that actually just show up, again, more cool songwriting dynamics, but also that just visceral, disgusting aggression. I don't know how much more I need to actually talk to sell anyone on this album if they have never heard it, but this is essentially the linchpin of Florida death metal, at least in my opinion, and I would say quite possibly one of the most important albums in death metal history. So yeah, if you have never heard this for whatever reason, I think most people have, check this out. It's just fucking amazing still. It has aged like a fucking fine wine. It's death. It's amazing. That's pretty much their entire discography in my opinion, but this one, still my favorite to this day. Morbid Angel, the legendary debut album from this Tampa band. Pretty much, I would say, another one that is an absolutely essential death metal album. Their debut came out fucking just swinging with even more technical riffs, some insane drumming from Pete Sandoval, absolutely amazing songwriting, and a little bit different than what Death had done. This came out in 1989, a year later after Leprosy, and This definitely explored more technical writing. There's synths peppered in for atmosphere, especially on songs like Chapel of Ghouls, which is like one of my absolute favorite songs by this band. This is a prime example of showing the evolution of death metal, just again from its early roots. This one still has thrashy influence, which a lot of US death metal early on really came from thrash. But this took it into different territory with, again, more like dissonant, strange riffs. Like sometimes they're a little bit more atonal, but they're very catchy. And I would say Pete Sandoval's drumming is probably some of the most aggressive drumming you would hear in 1989. Like this is, I would say, one of the heaviest albums that came out in 1989, period. While death sounded very vicious and just fucking ugly and gnarly, Morbid Angel had that, but they also had like sort of an evil factor. Like there's a lot of like Lovecraftian vibes. David Vincent's delivery was a little bit more throaty and raw sounding, and he enunciated everything really well. So you could actually make out the lyrics a good chunk of the time. And yeah, no, they were kind of spooky. I mean, at the time when I first got into Morbid Angel, which was with Covenant, that was the most evil music I think I had heard as a teenager. Now, of course, I'd listened to much more evil shit, you know, years later, but I think it's mostly due to the fact that Morbid Angel sort of ushered me into that. It's like, yeah, no, this is like legit fucking creepy. And a lot of that is also due to Trey's guitar style. It's very twisted sounding. The riffs are just kind of disgusting and disturbing. And his lead work on here is both very technical, very shreddy, and also very melodic, but also lots of crazy dive bombs and just wild shit. Like he's attacking the guitar half the time. This album is absolutely packed with some of my favorite songs. Visions from the Dark Side, Suffocation, Maze of Torment. God, Blasphemy is fucking killer. I love the breakdown on evil spells. There are pretty much no bad moments on here, which is why I had it at number 2 on my list and not at number 6. Anyway, yet another one that if you have not checked out for whatever reason, check it out. If you like death metal and somehow have skipped over this album, I don't see how that is possible, but if that is true, I recommend going back, jamming this one. If any of the bands that you like have a very evil sounding style of death metal with weird twisted fucking riffs and just wild solos and insane drum work, it is probably due to Morbid Angel. And probably some other bands too, to be fair, but I mean, let's be honest, in 1989, this might have been the most brutal, twisted death metal album that came out. I love it. I think most people love it, but yeah, check it out if you haven't because it's so goddamn good. Brutality, Screams of Anguish. Debut album from this Tampa band came out in 1992. 1992, I think, was one of the best years for death metal. So many fucking great albums, and this one should be included. This band is the definition of underrated. And unfortunately, it's partially due to the fact that there have been a lot of breakups and reformations. This band definitely seems to struggle like keeping the band together. But regardless, I think pretty much they have nothing but quality releases, but this debut is possibly my favorite one. This band brought even more technical play, the brutal, nasty riffs, like there's a little bit more of like that suffocation level of brutality in their sound, but also a surprising amount of melody. The leads on here are almost all just very gorgeous, very melodic, but that doesn't take away from the brutal nature of this album, which is just pummeling breakdowns, solid grooves, lots of blast beats. Like this is just an absolutely savage album. I love the songwriting dynamics on here. These guys can flip from blazing fast to just flat out doomy, especially on songs like Crushed and Septicemic Plague. There are some decidedly more doomy moments on here. I love pretty much every track on here. And that includes the 2 instrumentals, Spirit World and Sympathy. Sympathy is like a little bit more classical with some lush synths in it, and then Spirit World is a little bit like darker, but also still acoustic. And again, their gift for melody on here is such an important part in here because it shows the depth in their songwriting. And honestly, when it comes down to like their best songs, it's where they actually write some longer songs, like Crushed. Crushed is over 6 minutes long, and it is just an amazing fucking riff fest. Again, you have like some slightly doomier riffs, but there's also some really like cold tremolo riffs that kind of make it sound a little bit more sinister. And then the song Cries of the Forsaken, another favorite of mine. I love the guitar interplay. The riff work is outstanding, how both guitars will play off of one another. There's some really killer harmonies on there. These longer songs overall, and I might as well throw in Spawn Delusion because that one's a fucking banger too. all a little bit more intricate, and again, it shows the evolution of death metal sound, getting more technical, trying some different things, but still retaining that fucking brutality. And this isn't all like super technical stuff, like sometimes you have like more thrashy bangers like Cryptorium, which is just fucking fantastic. Honestly, every track on here I would say is golden. Again, this is like the definition of an underrated album and an underrated band. I think all of their releases are really solid. Even my least favorite one, which I'm not entirely sure which one that might be, but it's still really good. This band didn't put out a bad album, and they are reformed. Like, they broke up as recently as 2021, but according to the archives, they are back at it. I had the pleasure of seeing them in MDF in 2019, and it was an absolutely fucking amazing set. One of my favorite sets from MDF that year. So I'm looking forward to hopefully going over some new Brutality in the future. I'm hoping they get it together because this band is too good to stay quiet. So yet again, another one I would say check it out if you have not checked it out. This is, again, the definition of an underrated band and an underrated album. This debut fucking crushes start to finish. Definitely check it out. Monstrosity Millennium. This is the second album from this then Fort Lauderdale band. I believe they ended up moving to Tampa as well. Their debut, Imperial Doom, is absolutely fantastic, but this was the first album I ever got by them, and I was absolutely fucking hooked. This was the last one to feature one George Corpse Grinder Fisher on vocals. He was actually recording the vocals for Cannibal Corpse's Vile, I believe, at the same time he was doing this one, and both of those albums couldn't be more different. Monstrosity brought a level of technicality to their fucking death metal that I still think is just jaw-dropping. But it's technical in the sense of just riff work. Like, this isn't wankery and noodling. This is intricate riff work, badass drumming from Lee Harrison, who I think is a fucking legend on drums. And songwriting that I think is both technically impressive and memorable because there are hooks and great riffs that repeat all throughout this. The only thing I don't like about this album is the album cover, which, yeah, I don't know what this piece was titled. Cosmic Egg in the fucking Sunset. It looks like a Windows 95 screensaver. I don't know if this came in late and they're like, ah, fuck, we just gotta fucking roll with it. But yeah, no, this is just really fucking bad. This is an album cover so bad that if I didn't already know that this band was like pretty legendary in terms of like underground Florida death metal, I might have skipped it just based on the album cover because it's awful. But I'm glad I got it because this is absolutely amazing, start to finish. Again, the riff work in here is so goddamn good. You have more thrashy callbacks of songs like Manic, Dream Messiah. The opening track, Fatal Millennium, is an absolute fucking banger. Devious Instinct actually kind of sounds a little bit like Cannibal Corpse, not just because Corpse Grinder's on vocals, but the riff work definitely has like almost a bleeding-like feel. I love the pacing on this album. Lots of fast-paced sections, loads of groovy breakdowns, but when they get down to like some slower stuff like Fragments of Resolution, it's doomy, it's more sinister. I like how that song kind of lumbers through with just these giant fucking riffs, but it also peppers in some cool atmospheric elements at the end. It's very creepy and sinister and dark. The last couple of tracks, though, Stormwinds has some of the best fucking riffing on the entire album, and that is saying something because I love every fucking track. And Seas of Change, a little bit more technical, especially in the bass play. There's some really fucking slick bass noodles on there. I also think it's interesting that Jason Avery did a lot of the backup vocals on here, backing up Corpse Grinder, and he actually ended up being their vocalist on the next album, in The Dark Purity, which is honestly another one of my favorites. Monstrosity doesn't have a bad album. I will definitely die on that hill with that statement. I don't think they have a weak album. I love all of them. But this was the first one I ever got, so I had to bring this one up because this set me on the fucking path of just amazing death metal. Or at least amazing death metal I hadn't fucking discovered yet. And yeah, every album fucking whooped ass. But yeah, this is a fantastic album. Honestly, I don't know if it's a controversial or hot take, but I do like this one more than I like Cannibal Corpse's Vile. While Vile established him as Cannibal Corpse's new vocalist, I think this was a great standoff. And in terms of like the better album that came out in 1996, it's this one for me. And again, of course, if you have never checked out Monstrosity, literally check out all of their albums. Just fucking sit down and jam them through. You'll be greeted to nothing but the finest death metal I think Florida has to offer. You can literally start with any of the albums, but honestly, this one right here would not be a bad place to start at all. Everything that I love about Monstrosity is on here, and that's all stuff that continues to be on their albums. But yeah, just check out Monstrosity. Super underrated band. Nothing but the finest fucking death metal right here. Monotheist Scourge. This is the debut album from this Orlando band, came out in 2018. We're going to get into some newer stuff here. And this is some absolutely amazing progressive death metal / technical death metal. I had heard rumblings about this band and decided to check them out, and oh my god, this album fucking flat out whoops ass. While this band is very lavish in their songwriting, it's very technical, lots of wild transitions, you even have strings and horns that show up in here, this band is fucking brutal. The first 2 tracks alone, The Grey King and Great Chain at the Neck of the Earth, establish the fucking brutal sound that is on here. You have deep, chunky guitars. A lot of the production and the sound on here is very similar to, I would say, like Rivers of Nile, Black Crown Initiate, and I would say even The Faceless to a degree. But it's got a lot of that old school sort of brutality that you would hear in a band like Suffocation as well. In fact, the breakdown on Mark of the Beast, Part 1, The Image, it pretty much has that Liege of Inveracity sound where it just comes in and hits you harder than everything. But the thing I love about this album is how it flows. Again, those first 2 tracks establish fucking dominance right away. They are fucking crushing, brutal as hell, lots of breakdowns, blast beats, the riffs are fucking angular and tight. But as the album goes on, it starts to get more lavish and more proggy and more lush and atmospheric. Mark of the Beast Part 1 is where it starts. Again, comes in fucking swinging, but then you start getting into like kind of jazzy breakdowns, a little bit more proggy, like, you know, this is also the state that spawned Cynic and Atheist. That's where that influence starts coming in. The clever songwriting here really drew me in, and the fact that they were willing to like bring in so many different elements. Like the title track actually has a section where it's like Japanese single string bow, like that sort of plucked, bloop, bloop, bloop. Like, you know, I don't necessarily know how to describe it, but you would know it if you hear it. I love how that is integrated into the song, and then it transitions into like all the melodies that you would hear later on, which are very proggy, and again, surprisingly very clever, lots of twists and turns. The giant 10-minute instrumental on here, Infinite Wisdom, is absolutely amazing. Definitely some nods to bands like, you know, Opeth, I would even say Cynic once again. But there's also like some callbacks to like some early prog rock too, like Rush and Yes in terms of like the songwriting style. There's some really cool jazz fusion moments on Desolate It Mourns Before Me as well. There's also like a salsa sort of like drum beat that's on there, which is absolutely fucking awesome. I love this album. This album is another one that I think is very underrated. This band hasn't done much since this one. I think they released like a couple of singles after this, and I know they changed vocalists from the vocalist that's on here, but I definitely need another one. Honestly, you know, I kind of fallen out of love with a lot of tech death, but this album shows off like great songwriting and technical play. Like there's a lot of bands out there that, you know, yeah, they can play like a lot of cool technical shit, but it doesn't generate anything memorable. This album generates a ton of fucking memorable shit. Absolutely fantastic album. I strongly recommend it, again, if you're a fan of bands like Rivers of Nile, especially their earlier stuff, Black Crown Initiate, The Faceless, definitely along those lines. But again, mix in like the brutality of like Suffocation and of course the prog fucking sensibilities of like Opeth, Cynic, and fucking Atheist. This is just a fucking flat out killer album from start to finish, and you should definitely check it out. Carnal Ruin, The Damned Lie Rotting. This is the second EP from this Tampa band. Sadly, this band broke up not too long ago, actually last year, after their really fucking killer debut, full-length, Soulless I Remain. But I wanted to go over this band because they have a different sound for the area, and this is where I started with them. And yeah, this is some HM2 filth, except it's fucking from Tampa. This legit sounds like it came out in fucking Sweden in the fucking 90s. Like, this has all the dismember, bloodbath, fucking entombed glory that I could ever fucking want, and it came from Florida. Which is still odd, but not completely unheard of, because, you know, there's HM2 death metal everywhere. I should fucking know, because I do my best to try to own all of it. But yeah, this is where I started with this band. As soon as I heard the first track, Elder Spell, that fucking tone comes in. There's so much fucking buzzsaw on this fucking album, it'll fucking slice your eardrums in half. This is fucking Riff City, driven by a monstrous tone. The production here, absolutely fucking fantastic. It kind of has that Dan Swano-esque charm to it, where it just feels just well mixed, well balanced. Everything sits in a great place. The vocals on here are absolutely fantastic too. I love his delivery. It's very reminiscent of Peter Tagdren. Like, he's got a good high scream, great well-pronounced lows. But man, it's the riffs on here. The riffs on here are just fucking crushing. There's lots of cool groovy pockets, thrashy sections. There's even a touch of doom, especially in the opening of Skolamance. And I would even say like just a hint of mellow death on Iniquitous Devout. That song, a little bit more, I would say, along the lines of like, you know, Paradise Lost and some of the melodies, but like Bloodbath executing that sound. So either way, you're getting something absolutely fucking crushingly heavy, but it's a little bit more, again, tuneful, but melancholy. But all 4 of these tracks on here are amazing, and I might as well just say the other one since I didn't say it. Ode to the Conquered, As the Damned Lie Rotting. I mean, I might as well say them all. It's all killer, no filler. While I don't think there's a hint of the Tampa sound on here, because this is straight up Stockholm worship, which I have no fucking problem with at all. But this showcases some variety in Florida's death metal overall, and this one was a clear standout. Again, I wish this band was still around, but they chose to break up not too long after the full length was released. But there is still plenty of their stuff out there, so I mean, if you like HM2 death metal, especially if you like HM2 death metal as much as I do, go get this. It's fantastic. Go get their full length. I also have a compilation of theirs, which includes like the first EP and I think one of their demos. It's all been great so far, so yeah, just check out this band. It's just fucking HM2 from the fucking swamps, and it is absolutely amazing, so check it out. Nightmare, Cacophony of Terror. This is the debut full-length from this Tampa-based band. They do have some members from Germany, though they are based in Tampa, which is why I chose them. That and I really fucking like this band. This band features current and former members of bands like Geigen, War from a Harlot's Mouth, and The Ocean. And has even recently bolstered their ranks by adding one Keith Murrow on guitars. That dude is absolutely fantastic. But this is some absolutely disgusting, bottom-heavy, droney, dissonant technical death metal that is just, well, I mean, as advertised, it is a cacophony of terror. This band loves atmosphere, dissonance, and bottom-heavy chugs. As Rin used to say, the guitars are tuned to F for floppy, like the strings, because these are just deep, nasty chugs. Kind of like, you know, Meshuggah, Ion Dissonance, and Hate Eternal all got together and decided, hey, let's make the most terrifyingly fucking heavy album we possibly can and tune these bitches way the fuck down. But the thing that I love about this album is, while it is brutal and crushing, like when it comes down to breakdowns, especially on songs like Skinner and Cave Digger, it is dark. It is very atmospheric and just creepy sounding. The vocals are brutal, but they can also be really haunting, like the song Death. They're kind of pushed in the background and it sounds like the dude's like just trapped at the bottom of a well and just pleading for his life, which that matches a lot of the atmosphere. This, again, bottom heavy chugs, but also like dissonant, just sort of atonal melodies, especially in the song Bleach. There are some melodies on there that are almost sort of disorienting. Like it's just this atonal crawl that it does generate its own sort of unique hook, and it is blended well with like all the chugging, but man, it's just creepy and just weird sounding, and I don't know, I kind of like that. Now this isn't like Portal where that is, you know, kind of the base thing to be creepy and disorienting and just kind of musically fucked up. This also delivers giant fucking riffs that really stay in your head. Like the song Ceremony of Control, just flat out brutal as hell, but also cascades into like some more doomy territory. This can go from like peaked aggression with blast beats to just slow lumbering crawls. Again, Cave Digger, possibly one of my favorite tracks on here. And really interesting one because they did a remix on it, because this CD comes with a bonus track, and the remix is almost like a full tilt, like Godflesh style remix. Granted, it's a little bit more on the electronic side, so honestly, kind of similar to like Author and Punisher, but it adds a whole other level of just creepiness to the song. I mean, as if it actually needed it. Like every song in here, there are sections that are just flat out haunting, but again, you're just being pummeled over the head by just the most bottom-heavy fucking chugs on the fucking planet. Now, generally with me, like, too much dissonance can ruin an album, but this balances out riffs and atmosphere really well. There's really great transitional atmosphere between the tracks, so the album flows really well. And at no point would I say the atmosphere gets in the way at all. Recently went over an album where atmosphere kind of just drowned out everything. This, it's really well done, very well paced. You get some good swells of like, you know, big heavy sections to like clean, more subdued sections, and then into a different kind of heavy section. I like those kinds of dynamics. And again, paced well to make for a really immersive listen. Now I know this band actually has a new one coming out and I'm actually really eager to check it out. I know, again, a lot of these guys are busy in other projects, so, you know, these releases probably get spaced apart quite a bit. But if it's anything like this, I'm probably gonna dig it. If you have not checked out this band for whatever reason and you like, again, bottom heavy fucking guitars, ruthless chugging, and lots of dissonance. Again, along the lines of like Ion Dissonance mixed with Hate Eternal, like it's just brutal as hell. Definitely check this out. This is a monstrous listen. Wharfluch, Psychedelic Realms of Hell. This is the debut full length from this, I believe, Gainesville band. At least the main guy behind it, Mike Colby, is from Gainesville, so I'm just gonna go with that. This was a year ender for me in 2021, actually a top 10 one. And I was kind of hesitant about bringing this one up because I know there was some like controversy in the band, like all the members left, and I believe there were some accusations, but honestly, I don't know if anything came of it. And it might have just been rumblings. I don't know for a fact. I tried looking it up, and honestly, it seems like all that stuff is just kind of not there anymore. I tried following up on it and see if there were like any other developments in the band, but I really can't find anything. So it may have just blown over. Again, I don't know. But I know that this album is absolutely fucking amazing and kind of unique in a way. This is definitely old school death metal with touches of death doom in it, but this band does something cool with atmosphere that really makes this album stand out. Of course, you have all of the bludgeoning, old school death metal riffs all over the place. It's fucking heavier than hell. It's very well written, technical at times, but never loses the riff. But it's the atmosphere. The atmosphere is different. There are lots of cool synths on here, and while horror synths are very popular in old school death metal, I fucking love them. Anything that sounds like fucking, you know, like a Fulci movie playing in the background, give me that shit all day. But this goes for spacey, cosmic atmosphere. Like, it's very trippy. There are sections on here that are almost sort of like proggy and Pink Floydy, but, you know, it's the weird atmosphere that makes this even more engaging. Like, I already love the riffs. The riffs are fucking great. It's, again, brutal and heavy, but it's this weird, psychedelic fucking atmosphere in here that makes this even more enjoyable. Right from the rip with the opening track, Celestial Mycelium, it's just fucking awesome sounding. The production is very raw, but it's well mixed. I love, again, all the wild riff work. But it's when you get to the more expansive songs, I guess you can call it, like Abandoning Reality and Phantasmagorical Fumes. Man, these songs just take on some fucking wild characteristics. The transitions are kind of just strange, but they really work, and it's like a weird, twisted fucking journey. I mean, there are definitely some songs that get fucking flat out brutal right out of the gate, like Stoned Ape Apocalypse, which is just fucking mercilessly heavy. It's like a fucking Neanderthal that fucking just started his day with a breakfast of like a pound of fucking mushrooms and just went ape shit. It's pure psychedelic unga bunga. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily call it like caveman death metal because, again, it's very technical, lots of layers, really cool lead guitar parts, like their dreary leads on Celestial Mycelium, very atmospheric. There's a lot of thought that went into the construction of these songs. This isn't just primal chugging or anything like that, but it has that sort of like brooding sort of nature to it. Like the songs, when they get down to being heavy, they are brutal as fuck. But this album flows really well, and it has a lot to do with transitional atmosphere. Again, spacey synths. You have some vocoder sort of like spoken word sections, very cynic-y in nature. And while there is a lot of the synths and a lot of the atmosphere, it never overtakes the album. I mean, pretty much like I was saying about Nightmare, the atmosphere is in a great place on the album. It doesn't become the focal point, but is such an awesome seasoning to the fucking meat and potatoes that are fucking on here. It's quite possibly the perfect mix of just great atmosphere and flat out brutal riffs. It captures, you know, so much shit that I love about death metal in general that this album just became an instant fucking hit with me. Now, I know this band is still active, though it is just Mike Colby at this point, at least as far as I've seen in terms of the archives. But I'm hoping for another fucking follow-up to this because this is just fucking amazing from start to finish. Again, I'm not sure if the controversy about this band is like resolved or whatnot. It does seem to have died down quite a bit. I don't know, but all I know is I definitely want more of this because this is absolutely fucking fantastic. So yeah, if you did not check out this album when it dropped, it's still fucking out there. Go check it out. This is quite the fucking listen. I feel like it's just kind of a cool spin on something that's just well established. Like, this is, again, straight up death metal, but there's this weird fucking twist to it that makes it kind of unique and kind of stand out. Definitely check it out. Fucking awesome album. Deicide, self-titled. This is their 1990 monstrous fucking debut. Deicide is pretty much one of my favorites out of the entire Florida batch. They pretty much set the standard for that thrashy fucking death metal. This is chug-driven. The riffs are fucking sick. Another one where I don't feel like I need to say very much, but I'm probably going to say a lot because this album fucking whoops ass. While generally I gravitate towards Legion in terms of like those first 3 legendary Deicide albums, this debut is absolutely monstrous, explosive. This is a satanic fucking altar of riffage that I love coming back to. Some of my favorite Deicide songs are fucking on here. Lunatic of God's Creation, Sacrificial Suicide, dude, Dead by Dawn, absolutely fucking crushing. The closer, Crucifixion, is fucking amazing. I could literally name every track just because every track is fucking awesome. I've now seen Deicide 3 times, and I have to say, like, they are one of the tightest live bands out there. Good chunk of that is due to fucking Steve Eshim's insane fast fucking drumming. That dude is a fucking machine. But that's also due to fucking Glenn Benton being just such a beast of a frontman. His vocals are absolutely insane. I love what they do with the layering of the vocals in here, where he has like just twisted sort of gnarly vocals behind him. Namely Dead by Dawn, where there's all the demonic screaming in the background. It adds a lot. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of like too much vocal processing, but this is just clever layering just to make it sound more evil. And trust me, when you see them play Dead by Dawn live, you're gonna get your fucking money's worth because they're gonna kill it. This is such a bullet train listen to. Like, there is not even a moment to really catch your breath on here. Every song, one after the other, is like just a fucking gut punch. The intensity on this album is so fucking dimed, but there's enough dynamics to really space out. There's great sections of groove, like the eponymous track, Deicide. Nice groovy stomp to it. But the riffs are just fucking excellent. A great match of hooky, but maintaining that aggression. It doesn't sound at any point that they're letting off, the gas at all on this. And the songs themselves are very concise. Most of them don't get past the 4-minute mark. Actually, most of them are around the 3.5-minute mark, with Day of Darkness being only like a little bit over 2 minutes. But they're pretty much perfect in terms of just having all the fat stripped off them, getting down to exactly what these songs need to be brutal, concise, and just explosive as hell. And that isn't to say that they're bare bones. There's really cool elements of atmosphere in here, like Carnage in the Temple of the Damned. There's a very Jim Jones-ish quote on there. I think it's from a movie, but it screams Jim Jones because it pretty much is telling people, is like, yes, they're coming in with flamethrowers, drink the wine and sleep forever. Like, pretty much telling the cults, like, well, I'm gonna die, so you all have to die with me. I'm not sure if that dude was offering the same AK-47 chaser if you didn't choose to drink the Kool-Aid, but yeah, it definitely sounded like that party was ending in not so glorious fashion. But in that song, there's also like, peppered like samples from movies and shit, or like spoken word. It adds a lot to the songs, and the songs themselves already kind of stand without the atmosphere added. Like, it's just brutal and fucking concise. The riff work is so fucking tight in here. Again, I'm just going to go into like a rant of gushing about this album because it's fucking amazing. To me, Deicide's first 3 albums are like the unholy trinity of death metal, especially Florida death metal. Some of my favorite fucking shit ever in death metal, honestly. So yeah, if you have never checked out Deicide's debut, what the fuck are you doing? Check out Deicide's debut. Check out the first 3 albums. Check out the fucking 4th one, too. Serpents of the Light's pretty fucking badass. It's just not quite on this standard. That's just me, though. Those early Deicide albums are just so fucking good. But yeah, check this out if you haven't. If you have, go listen to it again. It's just as good as you remember it. But yeah, the important thing is just fucking listen to it. And finally, to close this one off, yet another Stone Cold classic with Obituaries Slowly We Rot, their 1989 debut album. This is one of my favorite bands in death metal, one of the bands that got me into death metal along with Cannibal Corpse and, Deicide, Morbid Angel. But this band embodied pretty much everything I love about the old school sound. It is about riffs, It is about just fucking groove, and these songs still stick with you. John Tardy is still one of my favorite death metal vocalists of all time. I love how, at least in these early albums, they like to layer his vocals, like fade him in, fade him out. His delivery is just so damn good. It's pretty much like he, listened to Chuck Schuldiner and is like, you know what, that's good, but it needs more ugh. And it just became a thing. Like, every word he says is just carried on with a little ugh at the end of it, and it's like the token John Tardy thing, and he sounds creepy, he sounds monstrous. But behind that, you have excellent fucking riff work. The riff work has always been, a little bit more minimalistic, a little bit more primal, but man, like the tone, the feel of it, it's just fucking disgusting. It sounds like it crawled out of a fucking swamp in Florida, and that's, I think, pretty much what you want to go for. I remember years ago watching an interview with Trevor Perez and Frank Watkins, rest in peace, Frank, about Obituary sound, how definitely they were influenced by thrash metal, but they were also like huge fans of Hellhammer and Celtic Frost, and that was a thing that, became a big part of their sound. Like, that's why they were a little bit more groove laden. They did have thrashier songs for sure, especially Ungodly Beings and Gates to Hell, but there's a lot of D-beat. It's more about the kind of creepy, sinister sounding riffs on there. And, Trevor's guitar tone has always been a little bit comparable to Tom Gabriel's. But this album is fucking amazing. The opening track, Internal Bleeding, as soon as you hear that opening fucking John Tardy puke, it just kind of sets the tone for this just disgusting album. Tons of meat and potatoes, just disgusting, powerful riffs. I mean, the title track is iconic. I love that fade-in intro with that fucking creepy, dingy riff and how it goes into like a D-beat fucking punky fucking storm. One of my favorite fucking tracks of all time by this band. I love the groovy fucking chugs that are all over Suffocation, Intoxicated, and Stinkopus, which is just a weird fucking title. Now, there is like one weird issue with this album, is that the last 5 tracks were actually recorded separately and pretty much added on, because I believe they went in the studio and they said, well, you need some more tracks because this isn't long enough for a full length, because a good chunk of these songs are actually pretty short. But they recorded 5 more songs and they did it with different production. I think it was like a 24 track recording, and parts of it sound better, but I think the one thing that it didn't quite sound as good were the vocals, just in terms of the production. Like, John Tardy's vocal delivery is always on point, but his vocals sounded really dry on that second half. But at the same time, the guitar sounded a little bit thicker. Doesn't hamper the songwriting at all, but it's just sort of a weird thing about this album where you notice it right away when it goes from fucking Words of Evil to Suffocation. Like, you can pick up on that there's just a bit of a change on here. But that would be like my one nitpick about this album. It is an absolutely crushing debut. I think, honestly, Cause of Death might still be, like, the number one for me. Like, Incomplete's way up there. Another band where I'd say, like, the first 3 albums are, like, the Unholy Trinity. But honestly, their last 2 have been fucking incredible. That new one fucking rips. Obituary just fucking rules. They embody fucking death metal. Like, Obituary is one of the first bands I think of when someone says Florida death metal. They're pretty much proof that you don't need a ton of ingredients to make something really fucking amazing and memorable. And they've been doing a solid job of it, and I think once again they are on another fucking tear of just good albums here lately. Yet again, I'm gonna say, because I'd say it for all of them, if you haven't checked this out, which this is a pretty fucking big one, you're missing out. You're 100% missing out on an amazing fucking debut and an amazing band. I mean, judging by the response we got in the Obituary review, I know there are a ton of Obituary fans out there, but I feel obligated to say if you haven't jammed them, you fucking should, especially if you like death metal. But if you have, jam it again. It's just as fucking awesome as it was back in 1989. This is, again, stone cold classic. I wanted to close in a fucking really good one. And yeah, I think I definitely picked one. So yeah, check it out. All right, that knocks out another States of Metal. This was one I was really eager to get to, and believe me, the selection process for this was fucking tough, because I wanted to balance it out with some new stuff, because, nostalgic trips are fun, but I don't think it should be all that, and Florida has generated some killer bands past the fucking late 80s and early 90s. So yeah, there were a lot of bands that I had to leave off just because this was tough to keep it at 10. So yeah, Hate Eternal is definitely an honorable mention. I mean, Atheist was also in the running, Malevolent Creation, Angel Corpse, I thought about throwing that one on there, or Perdition Temple. Yeah, there's almost too much good death metal in Florida. Not a bad problem to have, though. And yeah, this was a lot of fun, and really not sure where I'm going to go next. I don't know. There's a lot of states left. So yeah, we'll just see where the music takes me. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our store is there. We do need to restock on shirts, but if you would like a shirt, that's where to get them. And that is also where to find our Patreon. Also, Denver Death Fest taking place April 20th through April 22nd, the King Room in Denver, Colorado, because that's where Denver is. Just made another announcement, another batch of bands. I believe we have 2 or 3 more announcements. I'm not entirely sure. Again, this is mostly John and Miller putting this thing together in terms of like the Thralls end of this. But so far, a lot of cool bands have popped up. Really can't wait to get out there and see this thing all come together. It's bound to be a fucking damn good time. Hopefully we'll see some of you there too. And of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following. It has been an absolute joy doing this. I try to think of different shit to say, but it all comes out thankful and awkward, mostly awkward. But, you know, the thankfulness is absolutely sincere. This is just amazing doing this. Got a ton of stuff coming up for you guys. I think we finally have a date to sit down and record the Crowbar ranking. And at the end of that ranking, we will announce the next 4 bands that we are going to cover, courtesy of our lovely patrons. So tons of stuff coming. I hope you all enjoyed the shit of it. And once again, thank you all so much, and we will catch you later.